I never imagined the most intense connection of my life would begin with a polite handshake in my father's hallway. I hadn't been back to Porto in almost a year. The city always looked like a painting, its red-tiled rooftops stacked against the river, the scent of coffee and sea air mixing in ways I hadn't realized I missed. I stepped off the train with my small weekend bag and immediately felt like an intruder in my own home. My father had been texting for days, asking me to come. Just a family dinner. I want you to meet someone. I should have known what that meant. He picked me up at the station in his usual too-loud car, wearing the same leather jacket he'd owned since my childhood, like time hadn't touched him, though the gray creeping into his beard said otherwise. "She's really lovely," he said, as we turned onto our old street. "You'll like her." I gave him a tight-lipped smile. "We'll see." He parked the car outside our old townhouse and helped with my bag like he always did. I walked up the familiar stairs, feeling every step press into the past. When the door opened, the scent hit me first. Lavender and something deeper, like warm wood after rain. Then I saw her. She stood in the hallway, barefoot, wearing a long, cream-colored dress that brushed her ankles. Her dark hair was tied loosely at the nape of her neck, and she looked up at me with the kind of calm that only comes from people who are never in a rush to impress. "You must be Maya," she said. Her voice was low and smooth, almost therapeutic. "Your father's told me so much about you." I shook her hand, her fingers soft but self-assured. "Ines, right?" She nodded. "Welcome home." Her smile was polite, but her eyes lingered, just a second longer than they needed to. I filed it away. Maybe I imagined it. Dinner was light and pleasant, salmon, salad, red wine that Ines poured with elegance, like she had hosted 1,000 dinners before this. My father dominated the conversation as usual, talking about his new photography hobby and the chaos at his work. Ines asked about my writing career, the book I'd almost finished, the articles I'd been publishing. She had clearly read them. She even quoted a line from a piece I'd written months ago. No one had ever done that, not even people I dated. After dessert, my father excused himself to take a call. Something about a late client and a postponed meeting. Ines and I were left at the table, the candle between us flickering shadows across her face. "You're not as cold as I imagined," she said suddenly, softly. I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" She smiled, sipping her wine. "Your father said you'd be skeptical. Of me." I didn't say I wasn't. She leaned back slightly. "Fair." Silence settled between us, not awkward, just full. I looked at her hands resting on the table. No rings, long fingers, a faint freckle on the side of her wrist. I wondered what kind of touch they carried. And then I caught myself. "Jesus, Maya." I got up to clear the plates. She joined me in the kitchen, moving next to me in quiet coordination, like she already knew the flow of this house. I tried not to look at her too much, but I could feel her body just close enough to be aware of, her perfume like warm fig and sea salt. When we reached for the same plate, our fingers touched. Neither of us pulled back immediately. Her eyes met mine. Neither of us smiled. Then my father walked back in, calling out from the living room, and we stepped apart like guilty kids. "Thanks for the help," she whispered, then returned to the dining room like nothing had happened. I barely slept that night. I lay in my childhood room, the posters of old films still on the walls, the streetlight casting moving shadows across the ceiling. I kept hearing her voice, seeing the look in her eyes. Direct, unreadable, not flirtatious, but something. Not imagined. The next morning, Ines made coffee and brought it to me on the terrace like it was nothing. "I didn't know if you took sugar," she said, handing me the warm mug. "Black is fine," I said. "Thanks." She sat next to me on the wicker chair, legs tucked under her like a cat, one hand curled around her cup. "Your father leaves for Madrid this evening," she said casually, Work, just for 2 days. I nodded, sipping slowly. My hands were cold around the mug, but I didn't move. She glanced sideways at me. It's a beautiful city, but I don't think I've ever felt at home in it. You've lived there? I asked. For a few years. But I prefer places like this, quiet, textured. Textured? She turned toward me, eyes clear. Some places are smooth and easy, but others make you feel things even when they don't try to. They have layers, rough edges, like people. I swallowed. You think I'm one of those places? Her lips curved, just a little. You tell me. I stared into my coffee. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was this. I hadn't felt this kind of tension with anyone in years. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that grows roots. That unsettles. That warms. And she wasn't even trying. That evening, my father kissed her goodbye at the front door, wheeled his suitcase to the cab, and disappeared into the night. And for the first time, Ines and I were alone. The silence in the house was different after my father left. Not empty, not peaceful, just heavier. I stayed in my room until late, trying to read, trying not to think. But I could hear her in the kitchen. Music playing low, the occasional clink of glass, running water. The smell of sautéed garlic floated through the hallway like a thread pulling me toward her. When I finally walked out, I found the lights dimmed and dinner already waiting. I wasn't sure you'd join me, Ines said, standing by the open window with a glass of white wine in hand. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. She turned, the wind lifting her hair just slightly. She wore a loose linen shirt tucked into high-waisted trousers, barefoot again. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing smooth forearms and that same freckle I couldn't stop thinking about. I hope you're hungry, she said. I made shrimp and lemon rice. You didn't have to cook. I wanted to, she replied. It calms me. We sat across from each other again, but this time there was no one else at the table. The candle flickered the same way it had the night before, but now it cast us in something different, like the light itself knew something was happening. We ate in slow bites, talked about books mostly. She liked old Russian novels. I teased her for being too dramatic. She laughed, then asked me what I was afraid of. Wasting time, I said. Loving people who don't really see me. She was quiet for a second. Do you feel seen here? I looked at her. Sometimes. Another pause. Are you afraid of this? She asked, her voice barely audible. I knew what she meant. The way our knees kept brushing under the table, the way she kept glancing at my mouth, the question we hadn't said out loud. Yes, I said. Me too. We didn't move for a long time after that. The candle melted lower. Her fingers rested against the wine glass like they were trying to stay busy. My whole body buzzed. When I stood to clear the table, she followed me again, like the night before. But this time, the space between us wasn't just tension. It was a thread pulled so tight, one touch would snap it. I placed a dish in the sink. She stepped beside me, too close. You're shaking, she said softly. I hadn't realized I was. She reached out and touched my wrist with just her fingertips. Maya, she said. I turned to face her. Her breath was warm against my neck, and then we kissed. There was no hesitation, no faltering, just mouths finding mouths like they'd been waiting too long. My hands slid into her hair. Hers gripped my waist. The soft sound she made when I pressed closer shattered every rule we hadn't spoken. We stumbled backwards toward the counter, laughing breathlessly between kisses. Her shirt slipped from her shoulder. I kissed the freckle on her wrist. She whispered something I couldn't understand. Maybe in Spanish, maybe just my name drawn out like a question she didn't want answered. We didn't make it to the bedroom. The living room rug became our universe. Clothes scattered, limbs tangled, every inch of us searching and learning and claiming. It wasn't rough or fast. It was slow, intimate, careful, like neither of us wanted it to end, but both knew it probably would. When it was over, we lay there in silence, the dim light painting our skin in shadows. "I shouldn't have let that happen," she whispered, staring at the ceiling, and turned my head toward her. "But you did." She looked at me then, her eyes soft, guilty. "I've never... with a woman." "I know," I said. "You don't have to explain." She sat up, pulling the throw blanket over her chest, her back curved forward, hair a curtain across her face. "He trusts me," she said. "He doesn't deserve this." Neither of us did. I wrapped the blanket around her shoulders from behind, resting my chin against her. "I didn't plan this," I said. "And I don't think you did either." "No," she whispered. "But I felt it from the first moment I saw you." Her hand reached behind to find mine. Our fingers laced together. The spell broke when the clock chimed midnight. She stood, gathering her clothes silently. I watched her dress, watched her pull her hair back into its usual calm knot. Like nothing had happened. Like everything hadn't just happened. "I'm going to bed," she said, pausing at the hallway. I didn't ask her to stay. I barely slept again. This time, not because of tension, but because I could still feel her hands, her breath, her weight against mine, and the terrible, beautiful truth of what we'd done. In the morning, she was already gone. Her note was on the kitchen table. I went to the market. Needed air. "I'll be back before lunch. Please don't go yet." "Ines." I stared at it, unsure whether to feel relief or heartbreak. I didn't know what we were now. What would happen when my father returned? What I would say? What she would do? But I knew one thing with painful clarity. We had crossed a line we couldn't uncross. And I had no idea how to live in the silence that followed. I didn't leave. I wanted to. I packed my bag twice that morning, paced my childhood bedroom like a trapped animal. But I didn't leave. Because part of me wanted her to come back, and part of me didn't want to be the one who ran first. She returned just after noon, carrying a brown paper bag and a bouquet of fresh basil. She moved through the door like she didn't know if she was welcome. "Ines," I said, standing in the kitchen, heart in my throat. She met my eyes. "You stayed." I couldn't make it to the door. She nodded, wordlessly. Her hair was a little windblown. No makeup, just freckles and sun and something new in her expression. Something less controlled. "I walked by the river," she said, placing the bag on the counter. "Bought sardines. I didn't know what else to do." I stepped closer. "You don't have to pretend that it didn't matter." "It did," she said. "That's the problem." She turned, slowly, to face me. "Last night, Maya. I haven't felt like that in years. Not with anyone, not even close." I swallowed. "Then why do you look like you're already mourning it?" She laughed almost bitterly. "Because I'm not free." "Then leave him." "It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" I asked. "If you want something more, if you want this, you can't keep playing a role in his story while rewriting mine." She looked away, biting her lower lip. The silence between us returned, thick and suffocating. "I don't want to hurt him," she said. "And you think this hasn't already done that?" I asked, softer now. Pretending is still betrayal. Just slower. She walked to the window, staring out at the courtyard where our neighbor's laundry flapped in the wind. "Do you think this was a mistake?" "No," I said. "But I think it's going to cost us more than we expected." She exhaled, long and quiet. "You make me feel young, curious, like I can still change. Terrifies me." "I feel the same," I admitted. She turned to me, eyes full of something between longing and fear. "Come with me to Lisbon," she said suddenly. "Just for a day, before he returns." My breath caught. Why? Because I need to know what this is when we're not in his house, when it's just us. I want to see if it still feels real. I didn't hesitate. Okay. We left that evening, her car winding down the coastal roads with the windows open. Music played low. Amalia Rodriguez, haunting and slow. Ines drove barefoot, one hand on the wheel, the other sometimes resting between us on the gear shift, close enough to touch but not quite touching. In Lisbon, she took me to a small apartment in Alfama she kept for quiet days, she said. It smelled like eucalyptus and old books, the windows open to a view of tiled rooftops and steep stone alleys. That night we didn't talk much. We made love again, but it wasn't like the first time. There was no urgency now, just depth, familiarity. Everything unspoken, said through fingers and mouths and breaths held too long. She cried afterward. I held her without asking why. In the morning, she stood at the window, wrapped in one of the linen sheets, hair messy, skin warm from the sun. I wish we'd met another way, she said. I don't, I replied. Because then we wouldn't be us, and I don't want anyone else. She turned to me, something like a decision settling into her bones. I'm going to tell him, she said. Not everything, but enough. My stomach turned. Are you sure? She nodded. He deserves honesty, and I deserve to stop living a life that isn't mine. I walked up to her, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You're braver than you think. She kissed me then, soft and full of farewell. We drove back in silence, her fingers clenched tighter around the wheel this time. When we pulled up in front of the house, my father's car was already in the driveway. He was early. She turned off the ignition and stared ahead. Do you want me to lie? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I said. But maybe not everything has to be told at once. She nodded. I stepped out first. He was waiting by the door, smiling. Maya, I got an earlier flight. Thought I'd surprise you both. I smiled back. You did. Ines came around the car slowly. He wrapped an arm around her, kissed her cheek. She let him. I stood a few steps behind them, arms crossed, heart beating loud enough to hear. Over dinner, he told us stories about his conference and the awful hotel coffee. Ines poured wine, nodded at the right moments, laughed at his jokes. I watched her carefully. She didn't look at me once, but her fingers trembled slightly when she reached for the bread. After dessert, she stood. I need to speak with you, she said to him, privately. They disappeared into the office and didn't come out for over an hour. When they did, he looked pale. She looked free. I stood to go. Maya, he called softly, avoiding my eyes. Drive safe. Ines walked me to the door. I didn't tell him about us, she said quickly, her voice shaking. But I told him I wasn't in love with him, that I needed time alone, that I needed to leave. I nodded, fighting the urge to kiss her goodbye. Will you regret it? I asked. No, she said. Only the hiding. I touched her cheek, quick and gentle. You'll find your way. She nodded. You already did. I walked down the steps into the cool night, her gaze following me like a lighthouse beam. And though I didn't know what we were anymore, lovers, secret strangers, I knew what we weren't. We weren't silent anymore.